Dictatorships cannot survive on fear alone. Fear can intimidate people and silence them. Loyalty is much stronger when something is obtained in return. This is a job, a contract, a promotion, a confiscated apartment, a protected business, a salary in a public institution, a legal privilege, or a place on the winning side. Nazi Germany understood this ruthlessly well. If you want to control a society, you don't just punish enemies. You reward obedience. Turn loyalty into an economic asset. Make people calculate what they will gain by cooperating. Show them what resisting will cost them and how expensive morality can be when power takes control. Like a paycheck, nothing in life is as simple as it appears. The popular image of Nazi Germany is built on these elements. Terror, uniforms, rallies, secret police, camps, violence, propaganda, and the war machine. All of these were real. Terror was not decoration. It was a central element. But terror alone cannot explain how a modern society with courts, ministries, businesses operates. Universities, banks, police departments, unions, newspapers, churches, and ordinary homes very quickly transitioned into the machinery of dictatorship. Fear tells people what not to do, but money tells people what to do. Jobs, contracts, confiscated properties, promotions, social benefits. Legal protection and business opportunities can turn obedience into rational self-interest. This is the dark genius of the loyalty economy. The loyalty economy is not just about corruption. Corruption often remains hidden because people still know the official rules. But the loyalty economy goes deeper. It completely changes the rules. It teaches people that advancement depends on political conformity. It tells businesses that contracts flow toward cooperation. It tells public officials that the continuity of their careers depends on ideological reliability. And it tells ordinary people. For citizens in the privileged group, this can mean job, security, status, and access. Being outside of access means exclusion, fear, confiscation, or worse. The Nazi economy didn't just punish enemies. It taught ordinary people that loyalty could bring profit. To understand why this worked, you need to start with the wreckage of Weimar Germany. After World War I, Germany was humiliated, indebted, politically unstable, and socially fragmented. The Treaty of Versailles imposed reparations and territorial losses. In the early republic, it faced street violence, coup attempts, assassinations, and deep ideological conflicts. Then came hyperinflation in 1923. Money lost so much value that even wages lost value between morning and evening. People carried cash in baskets, not because they were rich, but because the currency had become almost absurd. Nothing demonstrates stable civilization like needing a wheelbarrow to buy bread. Germany gained some stability in the mid-1920s, but the Great Depression shattered this fragile recovery. After 1929, foreign credits dried up. Banks struggled, businesses went bankrupt, unemployment rose, and millions lost faith in democracy. By the early 1930s, economic desperation began to make political extremism seem less crazy. For many people, and more like an answer, the Nazis offered scapegoats, order, national revival, jobs, and a sense of belonging. They promised that Germany could be rebuilt if the nation was purified, disciplined, and provided a sense of belonging, and united under a single will. It was a lie wrapped in economic desperation. And desperation is one of history's most reliable recruiters. When Hitler became chancellor on January 30th, 1933, the Nazis moved quickly. They didn't politely wait for democracy to recover. The Reichstag fire in February gave them emergency justification to suspend civil liberties. The Enabling Act in March gave Hitler's cabinet the power to pass laws without parliament. Political opponents were arrested. Communist and social democratic organizations were crushed. Independent institutions were brought into line. Within months, Germany transitioned from a troubled democracy to dictatorship. But this consolidation didn't happen just with police and decrees. There were also salaries, promotions, contracts, and career incentives. One of the first pillars of the loyalty economy was the purge of the state. In April 1933, the law for the restoration of the professional civil service allowed the regime to remove certain people, Jews and political opponents, from public service. This wasn't just an administrative matter of housekeeping. This was economic violence. For those identified as enemies, jobs disappeared. For those deemed reliable, positions opened up. Civil servants, judges, professors, teachers, lawyers, doctors, and administrators learned that professional survival was now tied to political conditions. The state was no longer a neutral mechanism. It became a loyalty filter. When the state becomes partisan, salary becomes a political test. A civil servant didn't need to be fanatical at first to understand the new reality. Advancement was for those who were actually compliant. Risk was for the suspect. Silence became safer than principles. Joining the party, ensuring linguistic conformity, avoiding criticism, and proving reliability could protect a career. Refusing was point one. This is how dictatorship spreads, through ordinary institutions, not just through dramatic arrests, but through daily calculations at desks, in offices, in schools, in ministries, and in courts. Then came the police state. The Gestapo was established in 1933 as Prussia's secret state police by Hermann Göring. Over the next few years, it was incorporated into the expanding security network of Heinrich Himmler and the SS Empire. By 1936, Himmler controlled the German police force nationwide. The Gestapo also became a central tool of surveillance, intimidation, detention, and political terror. But your question is important. How did they pay the Gestapo? Was this money legal? The answer forms one of the most important lessons of this entire story. The Gestapo wasn't financed like a rogue gang operating outside the state. It became part of the state's police structure. Salaries, offices, files, vehicles, prisons, informant networks, and administrative mechanisms were supported through state power, state budgets, decrees, and the legal authority of a captured regime. According to Nazi laws, much of this machinery was legal because the regime rewrote legality around its own power. That's actually the point. Legal is not the same as legitimate. When this movement captured the courts, ministries, police, budgets, and legislative process, it could make repression legal by writing the rules itself. The Gestapo wasn't outside the state. This is what happened to the state. It became loyal to the party instead of the law. This distinction matters far beyond Germany. Dictatorship doesn't always have to break every law if it can reshape the laws. Issue emergency decrees, redefine enemies, expand police authority, neutralize courts, and turn public money into the operating budget of political control. When this happens, the question to ask is, was it legal? Many terrible events in history become less comforting than people think. They were made legal first. Terror wasn't just lawlessness. Law was placed in service of power. The Nazis also understood that fear needed to be addressed together with employment. By 1933, unemployment was one of Germany's deepest wounds. The regime acted aggressively on public works. Rearmament, conscription, labor controls, statistical manipulation to create the appearance and reality of recovery. The Autobahn became a propaganda symbol of national renewal. Military production expanded. Rearmament intensified the workforce. Young men were drafted into service and labor programs. The state directed economic life toward war preparation and presented the result as national rebirth. But the price was very heavy. Workers gained employment opportunities, but they lost their independent power. In May 1933, the Nazis destroyed free unions. They seized their offices, arrested their leaders, and replaced independent worker representation with the German Labor Front. The regime offered jobs, but deprived workers of real bargaining rights. It presented itself as protecting the national community while making independent worker politics impossible. The message was clear. You could have a job, but you couldn't have a voice. You could belong, but you couldn't negotiate. You could work, but only within the political order the regime allowed. The regime offered jobs, but the condition for employment was obedience. Business learned the same lesson. Nazi Germany didn't eliminate private enterprise, it just redirected it. Many industrialists and businessmen didn't belong to Nazi ideology in the early period. Some feared communism more than Hitler. Some wanted stability. Some wanted labor discipline. Some wanted contracts. Some wanted access to the new state. Some complied because resistance seemed dangerous and cooperation seemed profitable. The regime didn't have to buy every industrialist. In a simple exchange of loyalty for money, it made cooperation profitable and resistance dangerous. Rearmament created enormous opportunities for firms in sectors like steel, chemicals, automotive, aircraft, construction, weapons, and logistics. The elimination of unions pleased many employers. State contracts flowed to firms aligned with regime priorities. Military spending created demand. Public procurement became a channel for political favoritism. The regime didn't eliminate big business. It taught big business that loyalty could be more profitable than neutrality. The financing itself was often deliberately non-transparent. During Hjalmar Schacht's time, the regime used instruments like mefo bills, introduced in 1934, which were used to finance rearmament and were backed by bills transferred to a shell company. This helped hide the scale of military spending and allowed the regime to expand the war economy while managing political and financial constraints. Simply put, the Nazis used financial engineering to finance militarization before the public could fully grasp the situation. Apparently, even dictatorships can benefit from creative accounting when tanks are involved. This wasn't free market capitalism in the clean textbook sense, nor was it simple state socialism. It was politically directed capitalism under dictatorship. Private companies could profit, but the biggest opportunities were directed toward the regime's goals. Business survived by learning, where power wanted money to go. This is corporate-level loyalty economy. The state didn't need every manager to believe every speech. They needed to understand the direction of profit, protection, and the mechanisms of punishment. Then came the darkest mechanism: theft, used as economic policy. The Nazis didn't just exclude Jews from citizenship, professions, universities, and public life. They systematically took their property, businesses, income, homes, and assets. Through boycotts, professional bans, forced sales, discriminatory regulations, the Nuremberg laws, escalating persecution, and ultimately deportation and murder, Jewish economic life was destroyed. Through the Aryanization process, Jewish-owned businesses and properties changed hands, often far below their value, through forced sales to non-Jews. This was no coincidence. This was redistribution through persecution. A dictatorship doesn't just destroy its victims. It uses them. It finds beneficiaries. This is the most painful sentence. The regime created opportunities. Jobs vacated by those purged. Businesses relocated under pressure. Apartments, assets, art, furniture, insurance claims, bank accounts, professional positions, and commercial opportunities were created. Every theft not only created a victim, but also produced someone who benefited from it. Someone who looked away, someone who bought cheap, someone who moved into the vacated space. This is one reason why loyalty economies become so morally poisonous. They turn crime into opportunity. They make ordinary people materially invested in not asking too many questions. Social welfare was also politicized. The Nazis constantly spoke of the Volksgemeinschaft, people's community. People's community, a racial and ideological fantasy of national unity. Social support, aid campaigns, winter relief programs, family assistance, and public aid were used to strengthen the sense of belonging for those deemed racially and politically acceptable. At the same time, Jews, political enemies, the disabled, Roma, and others were excluded, persecuted, sterilized, imprisoned, or exterminated. The welfare state didn't disappear. It was racialized, politicized, and turned into a reward for belonging. This is a fundamental model of authoritarian regimes. The population is divided into three groups: deserving insiders, suspicious outsiders, and enemies who must be punished. Benefits flow to insiders. Fear is directed at outsiders. Violence is legitimized against enemies. And people inside the privileged circle learn that their security depends on enemies. The regime continues to identify them as loyal, useful, and pure. This isn't social solidarity. This is conditional belonging imposed by power. By the late 1930s, Nazi Germany had built a loyalty economy where loyalty could touch almost everything: job, contracts, promotions, welfare, property, business opportunity, police protection, legal defenselessness, and social status. Fear was everywhere, but so was incentive. People didn't join the party just because they believed, but because membership could help careers. Businesses cooperated, not just because they agreed, but because the regime controlled contracts and labor. Officials complied, not just because they were afraid, but because advancement required reliability. Citizens withdrew, not just because they feared punishment, but because some would profit from silence. This is where the modern warning begins. Not with lazy comparisons, not with role-playing. That every country practicing patronage is Nazi Germany. History doesn't repeat with the same uniforms and slogans. The warning is structural. When public money, legal protection, jobs, contracts, investigations, pardons, compensations, and punishments start being given according to loyalty toward power, democracy begins to rot from within. The warning sign isn't when a government rewards everyone. Governments spend money, compensate people, hire, contract, and enforce laws. They support industries. The warning is when the state starts deciding who deserves protection, money, forgiveness, or punishment based on political alignment. When loyalists receive money, forgiveness, or punishment while professionals are purged. When allies get contracts while rivals face audits. When political violence is reframed as victimhood when committed by the right side. When legal consequences become negotiable for supporters. When public funds turn into compensation for one side's grievances. When businesses understand that open loyalty is safer than neutrality. When public officials learn that law is less important than the leader's preferences. This isn't normal democracy with debates. This is the early architecture of a loyalty economy. And that's why money matters so much. Ideology can inspire. Propaganda can persuade. Fear can silence. But money institutionalizes. Loyalty. A salary keeps someone inside the system. A contract turns a company into something. A pardon signals that service will be protected. A compensation fund can be transformative. Political grievances can be turned into a reward supported by taxpayers. Civil service can turn beliefs into career security. Public support can make private businesses dependent on the regime's favor. Selective investigation can teach everyone else where the line is. Once material life becomes tied to political obedience, freedom becomes expensive. The loyalty economy works because it makes morality costly and obedience was profitable. The Nazi example is an extreme example because it ended in total war and genocide. Nothing should simplify and cheapen this history as an analogy. But precisely because it is extreme, it reveals the mechanism with terrifying clarity. The regime used fear, yes, but it also used opportunity. It used jobs. It used stolen property. It used contracts. It used public money. It used legal privilege. It used social belonging. It used cooperation. It used welfare for insiders and terror for outsiders. This turned the economy into a loyalty map. The final lesson is that not every patronage relationship means the system is turning into Nazi Germany. The lesson is that authoritarianism isn't just imposed from above. It spreads when enough people start benefiting from not resisting. They get the job by staying silent. The company gets the contract by publicly conforming. When the police officer is protected for using power instead of law. The citizen accepts stolen aid because refusing would be risky. When people learn that's how justice works. Harsh on enemies, flexible on friends. This is how a loyalty economy changes a society. It doesn't require everyone to be monsters from day one. It asks them to make small compromises first, then another. Accept a favor. Ignore an exclusion. rationalize a purge, profit from a single vacancy, tell themselves that politics is complicated, everyone does this, that survival is priority, that someone else would take the opportunity anyway. And by the time people realize the economy has become an obedience machine, the machine may already be paying too many people to keep running. Financial freedom isn't just about protecting against losing money from inflation, debt, crises, or bad policies. It's also about understanding how money can be used to buy silence, loyalty, and obedience. Because when the state takes control of who gets paid, who's protected, who's investigated, and who's punished, money becomes discipline. History shows that fear can establish dictatorship, but fear alone cannot sustain it. The more durable system is one where loyalty pays, opposition costs, and ordinary people are pushed to ask not what is right, but what is safe. That's when a country is in real danger. If this gave you a new perspective, hit the subscribe button. See you.